Have you fallen into an open manhole recently? Do you find yourself in the company of strangers? Well, then you might very well be in the feature Underground. I am not Iron Man, but I am Hunter Lanier, and I'm here today with a review of the upcoming Fantastic Four, First Steps. If you're like me, you have probably lost interest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe ever since Avengers, Endgame, which felt like a pretty satisfying end to what was, all film snobbery aside, a really cool and mostly successful experiment of interconnected films. I was also 14 during the summer when the first Iron Man came out, which made me the prime age to enjoy the MCU as it unfolded. And I did. But the movies just kept going after Avengers Endgame, and judging by the ones that I did see, the movies seemed to be getting worse. So I didn't go see the new Captain America movie, I didn't go see Thunderbolts, but Fantastic Four caught my attention for a couple of reasons. Number one, perhaps the most important reason, the film is set in the 1960s, which is when the original comic books take place, and that aesthetic has a lot to offer. The second reason is just the importance of the Fantastic Four within the context of Marvel Comics, as they spearheaded Marvel's entry into the Silver Age of comics, which I think most people would agree is the best age of comics. Now, even though I'm hardly a card-carrying member of the sect of film fans that I like to call Starnolds, but wait, what is a Starnold, you may be asking? A Starnold is my term for a film fan whose primary points of interest in the vast history of movies is Star Wars, the crowd pleasers of the 1980s, especially Arnold movies, and all of the genre films that came after, specifically comic book movies and franchise films. Are you a Starnold, you may be wondering? Well, I think a good litmus test is if you were to name your top 10 favorite movies, would they include two of the following? The Empire Strikes Back, Back to the Future, Terminator 2, The Dark Knight, Captain America, The Winter Soldier. Starnolds traditionally have been a little hard for those of us who would consider ourselves more traditional movie fans to wrap our heads around, because they don't really seem very interested in people like Howard Hawks and David Lean and Robert Aldrich and Robert Altman. And calling yourself a movie fan without having the least bit of interest in the masters is understandably a little befuddling. But I'm not here to put them down or relegate them to the sidelines. I'm just saying that I think that is a separate category of enthusiasts, and one that I'm not entirely separated from. I would say I have a foot in the Starnolds. I love genre movies, and I want movies like Fantastic Four to be great. I've read quite a bit of the original Fantastic Four comics from the 60s, and I'm a big admirer of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's work. Mostly Jack Kirby, since I think the art of that era, including the art from Steve Ditko, is really what makes those comic books special and a really integral piece of American art. Whereas the writing of those comic books, I think, is far less interesting. As I was saying, even though I am not a card-carrying member of the Starnold community, I do have a deep appreciation for Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So I want to see these movies flourish with the wild creativity that is in their DNA. This return to the 60s and not shying away from the Jack Kirby aesthetic like a lot of the previous Fantastic Four installments have, and just the comic book film subgenre in general, is the best thing Fantastic Four has going for it. It really leans into the Atomic Age aesthetic, both in terms of the set designs, the costumes, the score, the scene transitions, to the many documentaries that are in the film, to the faux Ed Sullivan Show guy, to the space age optimism. All of that is great. And in fact, even the crowds and the extras in this film are unlike any other MCU movie. They actually reminded me most of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, Where in those movies, those crowds had that post 9/11 sense of mutual support. In fact, this Fantastic Four movie got me wishing that after Avengers Endgame was over and you tied up that whole big storyline, I wish everything after that had been 60s Marvel. I want to see Spider-Man go to Rolling Stones concerts. I want to see Tony Stark in Vietnam. I want to see an extra groovy Doctor Strange. One quibble I do have, the film is set in the 60s. Why is there not more 60s music? I think the film plays one song during a dinner scene and it's in the background. Why would you not make use of that amazing 60s soundtrack when it is served to you on a Silver Age platter? This episode of Feature Underground is brought to you by Kroger brand carbonated water. Where the film trips itself up is something that I actually also noticed in the new Superman movie, which is that the film is just too fast-paced. It really does feel like a product of the attention economy, in that the entire film is made out of sharp turns. There are very few straightaways, and short ones at that. The characters have no room to breathe, to make a case to the audience of why they're interesting and why you should care about them. Now, you may be wondering, Hunter, isn't this like a problem with every big blockbuster movie? Bad characters, bad writing? I would argue no. The problem traditionally has been that the writing of the quiet character moments and the characterization in these movies has just been written poorly. My problem with Fantastic Four is that there is no writing of quiet character moments. There is no characterization. And I'm exaggerating a little bit because there is a tiny, tiny bit, but it has shrunken down to an insignificant size. For example, with The Thing, there is a subplot where he has a crush on a local school teacher. And that arc, I guess you'd call it, I don't know. It takes place in 3 scenes that are dispersed throughout the movie. And each scene is maybe a minute long. I don't know, something like that. This subbiest of subplots is literally the lowest effort the filmmakers could have put into making The Thing a sympathetic character. It's been a long time since I've watched Michael Chiklis as The Thing, but my memories from that movie is that that character got a lot more screen time to just talk and be a human. I think part of the problem, and maybe even a large part of the problem, is that these movies are overcorrecting for an issue they used to have. I remember there used to be far more reboots more often. So there was this fatigue of watching Peter Parker get bit by a spider and realize he has powers and take off his glasses. People got tired of seeing these origin stories. But now they have overcorrected to the point where they're just throwing you into the world and assuming that you care about the characters and assuming that you even know who they are. Now, for dyed-in-the-wool comic book fans or dyed-in-the-wool comic book movie fans, maybe they're going to project the 80 years of Marvel history onto this vapid character. But for everyone else who is going to a movie to watch a fleshed out story with fleshed out characters, there's going to be a lot of empty spaces for them. And even for someone like me who has read the comics and has watched all the Fantastic Four movies, I felt that emptiness. I felt that disconnect. While we're on the subject of writing, I do also want to say that the comedy in this movie really doesn't work. It's one of the worst. It's one of the least funny Marvel movies I've seen. And not because it's being serious, but because the jokes just don't land. I know he is persona non grata, but Joss Whedon really was the master of that lighthearted, quippy style of dialogue. And most things afterwards, after his departure, have felt like a bad imitation. With the retro futurism and atomic age visuals in one corner. I didn't mention also, there is a a robot butler in the movie that is very cool looking. And Galactus also looks, I think, very cool in this movie. With all of that good stuff in one corner, and in the other corner, the very plot heavy, wide but shallow writing. I think you can call Fantastic Four fun but frivolous. It is not the restart that the MCU desperately needs to get back on track. And that is just because it doesn't give sufficient attention to its characters. What do people remember from, let's put it this way. Why did people fall in love with Tony Stark? Which, by the way, that began the MCU. That character kicked off that whole multi-billion dollar franchise. Why did people fall in love with that character? It wasn't because the first Iron Man movie was whiz-bang exciting. No one remembers Jeff Bridges in that movie. No one remembers the climactic battle, if there even was one. I don't remember. What people remember is, and what people connected to, is Tony Stark in that cave, rebuilding himself using only the good parts. People connected to that. People understand that. Everyone understands what that is, and people have had that moment in their own lives. There is a kernel of the type of thing that audiences would connect to in that way in Fantastic Four with the child of Reed Richards and Sue Storm. But once again, it's just not given enough attention, and it's used as a plot device to move the action rather than to stay still and be with the characters and connect with them. If Marvel wants its movies to be anything more than passing fancies for the Starnold community, they need to readjust their storytelling values. Well, those are all my thoughts on Fantastic Four: First Steps. Now is the time for you to let me know your thoughts on my thoughts. I'm curious how this video will do. I think my audience does not like these big budget movies and do not watch these videos when I do reviews of them. They much prefer my reviews of like the Eddingtons and the Warfares. But we'll see how many of you make it to the very end. If you did, good for you. Next up, I will be seeing The Naked Gun. I will be seeing that on Monday. So I will have a review of that out as soon as I can. Until then, I do have to slide under the table to you the uncomfortable but satisfying reminder that every day underground is a good day.